Now, our moderator for this session is Jitesh Malik, Regional Head, Payments and Rewards, Prudential Corporation Asia, and he will be speaking to Helena Zhang, Director, Asian Institute of Digital Finance at the National University of Singapore. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Jitesh and Helena. All right. So once again, before I hand the time over to our moderator, Jitesh, a gentle reminder, if you're asking a question later on, please remember to identify yourself and the organization that you are from. So without further ado, Jitesh, please.
Thank you very much, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, sorry. So we are supposed to do a fireside chat, and Helena and I were discussing, let's drop the fire out of it and let's make it more open discussion. And we realized we are at least not the last before you have a lunch, but we are close to your lunch time, so we like to make it more interesting and interactive. So you're all welcome to join the session. So we have Helena here. So Helena is a senior banking leader with over 20 years of experience in security operations and risk management. She has spent most of her career with Goldman Sachs, and after long tenure, she has decided to make an impact in the fintech scene as a director of Asian Institute of Digital Finance. So Helena, let's start by asking, what is Asia Institute of Digital Finance?
Sure.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jitesh. That's very nice of you, introduction. And certainly you have a lot of expertise in the payment space. I will be asking some questions later on.
Thank you.
If that's okay. So for those of you who are not familiar with Asian Institute of Digital Finance, AIDF, we are a fintech research institute jointly founded by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, National Research Foundation, and NUS back in 2020. We focus on education, research, and entrepreneurship in the fintech space. And I think more relevant for the context today, you can think of us as a technology contributor. Generally speaking, entrepreneurs, financial institutions, or even policymakers are very open in working with us to find the sweet spot where we can add value to their innovation solution. That's what I say about AIDF.
That's perfect. So Helena, I was thinking our topic is very wide today. So how about we focus on two aspects, SMEs and digital payments?
Sure.
Sounds good to you?
Good idea.
Okay. So basically, as we all know, that SMEs are backbone of our economy, right? I have some data points. In Singapore, SMEs employ 72% of the workforce, and they contribute to approximately 45% of nominal added value. In Vietnam, they employ 50% of the workforce and contribute to 40% of the GDP. Thailand, even better. They employ 85% of the workforce and contribute to roughly 40% of the GDP, right? But still, in the industry, SMEs and commercial banks, they're not happy with each other, right? We were discussing and you said commercial banks like SMEs who don't want lending, right? Yeah?
Back in the days.
Back in the days, okay, fine, right? So basically, what I want to know from your experience as a banker and now in the leading research institute, right? So how digital banking technologies can help development of SMEs economy, right? What's your viewpoint here?
I think, look, the technology has come a long way. I think there's more the machine learning and artificial intelligence has to offer. Particularly in the SME space, take lending, for example. I think some of the speakers earlier has touched on digital lending, but just diving a bit further, traditionally, the lenders have been relying on expert opinion or like traditional, conventional KYC to assess a credit profile. And with the rise of, and a lot of a lot of the smaller business, unlike listed companies, they don't have audited financial statements. So therefore, for a long time, they were pretty much unbankable. But with the rise of things like OCR or NLP, natural language processing, the lenders not only can digitize their lending process, but to also start to look at customer sectors who they were pretty much not able to serve previously. So for instance, a lot of the lenders has started to leverage alternative data sets. And by alternative data, for instance, those are POS data, transaction data, utility, even Google review, right? And sentiment on Google review. And you actually see quite a lot of lenders launching their own ecosystem. And of course, the data that they capture in that process, some of it can be used to enhance the credit decision making. Now, that is from a business case standpoint. From a technology point of view, there's still a lot of improvement can be made to deliver optimal solution. For instance, when you have a lot of alternative data sets, how do you effectively choose your variable, considering all the correlation? How do you deal with missing data? For instance, not everybody has a Google review. What do you do with those type of cases? This is where AIDF come in, and sometimes we can offer some help. And the other layer is, for example, around data privacy with so much data being shared. Actually, NUS has a delegated research center just to look at privacy preserving technology. Within AIDF, we look at, for example, federated learning, which is essentially a way to train data models across distributed data sites, and therefore it fundamentally eliminate the need to transmit sensitive data points. There are also ways to use artificial intelligence to generate fake data, right? Same way as a deep fake videos are produced, you can work on tabular data, but the key is to retain the underlying utility of the data set. So the point is that there's a lot of technology advancement, and hopefully some of it can channel and boost the innovation in this space.
Yeah, that's good. So what I particularly like is like how forward-looking regulator is working with NUS and National Research Foundation to incubate startups and making them ready for like future-ready organizations, yeah, as well as the market-ready solutions, right? And you touched point on this lenders launching ecosystem, right? So, you know, most of the reports we will read will say that although SMEs are not very happy with their commercial banks, and they're in every financial market, we'll see a lot of neobanks and fintech players, but still SMEs are not willing to jump the relationship from their main bank to the new third parties or the neobanks and digital banks, right? So how do you see this embedded finance playing a role here, and then how SMEs can leverage on these new solutions, right?
I mean, embedded finance is a very interesting concept, right? You know, as a consumer or small business, banking used to be a thing that we used to do. You know, we go to the bank, we fill up forms, and we wait for approval and wait for the money to be dispersed. And you know, over time, and I think it continued to be a trend where banking is going to be more embedded into our daily life, and for business is embedded into the core business activity. And that trend is here to stay, but with the so many ecosystem and platform launching, I would think there is going to be some level of integration and consolidation at some point. Mm-hmm. And also because there are so many players in this ecosystems, and you know, from a data standpoint, who's sharing, what data is being shared with who, and who's got license to offer which service, and there's something that we need to be very careful with. Mm. Actually, on that point, right, I would be interested to know, from an insurance standpoint, do you see a similar trend? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
embedded insurance. Maybe.
Embedded insurance, yeah, exactly. So I like to say, what is embedded insurance, right? So from my point of view, if an insurer can deliver the affordable product, more important, relevant product, personalized product at the right time, at the right place, right? So where the customer need most and when they need most, that's embedded insurance, right? So from my point of view, I always start by thinking customer first, right? So how can we help the society? So as you know, in the society, there is a huge protection or insurance gap, right? Meaning what people are actually buying compared to the optimal level where it is economically and socially beneficial for the society, right? So that gap is high. So personally, I see my point of view, not Prudential point of view, I see that distributed or embedded insurance, right, can bridge that gap because insurance companies can find a very cost-effective distribution model, right? And also have access to a lot of data which helps them to personalize, make the product more relevant also, right? So it's very, very important. And as well as for the third parties also, they add a huge differentiation and a new revenue stream also.
Yeah.
So I think this is something great. So we are for sure always looking to innovate and evolve ourselves and have a step ahead in the game, right? So what we did was we launched Pulse app 3 years back in Malaysia. So now it is available in 19 countries. It's in 17 countries, 11 markets, and as of December last year, around 32 million people downloaded the app, right? So you can think of Pulse app as a personal digital assistant, and our motto or objective is to make our customers healthier and wealthier, right? So how can we provide more affordable health care solutions and more affordable wealth management, or in another word, democratize health and wealth, right?
Yeah.
So how can we help protect, prevent, postpone onset of negative medical conditions, and as well as with the wealth tools, make our customer more prosperous. So we have now capability to do symptom checker, telemedicine, wellness coach, financial planning, investment management. And then we took a second step to say, okay, micro products or a bite-sized product, because if you want to go embedded insurance, the product should be easier, smaller, more relevant. So we have now launched bite-sized product in most of our markets. And then in Indonesia, now we are working with a large payment service provider to embed insurance into the payment flows, right? And then make it available across all the 34 provinces in Indonesia. In Philippines, not really embedded insurance, but we are working with our bank partners to embed banking into our Pulse app and vice versa, embed insurance into the banking. Then it will lead to embedded insurance also. So we are always working to see how we can help. And as I said, our objective should be to help the regulator to bridge the insurance gap also. So
Right.
that's what we focus to do.
Yeah, I guess you touched on an interesting point where a lot of the embedded solution aims to first of all customer centric, right? And what the customer wants to do rather than hey, I have a product, buy my product. That makes a lot of sense, and also there's a lot of inclusion, right? Insurance inclusion.
Insurance inclusion,
yeah.
yes.
So on the payment standpoint, you have a lot of expertise in this space, and what are the changes you have seen in the past couple years in the payment landscape, and not only from you growing your business point of view, but also from a consumer adoption standpoint?
Yeah, that's very, very interesting topic, something which I'm so passionate about, right? So look, now pandemic, now endemic, right? So one thing if there is anything good about pandemics or this endemic is like how they have accelerated the digitization and transformation, like technology transformation. And being a payment person, I always like to say, oh, payment is in the epicenter of this transformation, right? So now all of us have moved away from using physical currency notes to digital payments, right?
Correct.
Even I have colleague from Vietnam, right? Few years back, you could say, oh, Vietnam is a cash-rich country, but now adoption of digital payment is so high, right? And then it helps, right? If we have to deliver a digital product where you get the requirement online, where you underwrite online, you need to have digital payments. And you also have to give them the same experience what retail players are giving, right? Frictionless payment of our customer choice. And we see no matter in which part of the country you are in this region, digital wallets has become one of the top 3 payment methods, whether it is physical point of sale or whether it's e-commerce or a mobile point of sale, right? So we are working very hard to support all type of payment methods, whether it's internet banking, whether it's fast payment or real-time payments, e-wallets. And you brought up a very interesting point, right? So from me, I would also like to see how we can help payment to add differentiation. So in Cambodia, not exactly central bank digital currency, but we launch 𝐄𝐝𝐢𝐭 Bank, support for 𝐄𝐝𝐢𝐭 Bank. So it also helps us to drive insurance inclusion because 𝐄𝐝𝐢𝐭 Bank being based on crypto wallet is also provide peer-to-peer and also connect everybody in Cambodia with all the financial institutes and various fintech and digital wallet providers, right? So we see a lot more happening and we keep on doing a lot of work to make sure our customers can pay to us and we can disperse to them in the payment method of their choice 24/7 on time, right?
Yeah, so how much, it's interesting, how much of a use case is there for things like CBDC, stablecoin, alternative currencies?
Stable coins. I'm not sure last week whether they are really stable now.
Scrap that then.
Exactly, right. So what I'm more interested is the central bank digital currency, right? And what do we mean by central bank digital currency? Is like digital version of the sovereign fiat currency, right? Which is backed by the central bank and is a digital liability on the central bank books, right? Now, could be 2 flavors, whether it's a wholesale flavor or it's a retail flavor, right? So I'm quite interested as a personally, again, not Prudential point of view, but personally is to see how CBDCs can make the settlement, whether it's domestic or cross-border, more efficient. More and more customers are becoming regional. They travel for business or their families spread around. And it's very, very important for us to like disperse the claims or the maturity benefit on time, whether it's within the same boundaries or cross-border, right? So CBDC sure has a potential to make it more efficient, faster, better liquidity management, and maybe you should also like to share your experience. You were in commodities and securities, and cross-border is like, wow, has transformed a lot recently.
I agree. I think CBDC alternative currency do have a lot of potential. I used to work in the commodity sector, and we sat on, until this day, the process is that it sit on a lot of settlement risk, considering the time that I pay the money, but when you cite the funds, when we perform a cross-border transaction. So maybe that's something that CBDC or a real true CBDC-backed stablecoin, something like that's possible, right? Can be part of the solution. But on the flip side, I would also say that our policymaker, at least in Singapore, they are very well informed, all right, in the development. They are actively looking at pilot tests, POCs in the space. So in Singapore, where our Sing dollar, right? And pay now, things like that is very ubiquitous. And you kind of argue, do we really need another sort of domestic solution? Probably not, but in other economies where there is a need for financial inclusion, there may be a stronger case.
Yes.
And that's in addition to the cross-border use case. Now, but there's also a different argument that actually for CBDC still have a long way to go because it requires a lot of more responsibility, has a lot of more responsibility to the regulators and policymakers, central banks, right, particularly, because they firstly is from, let's say, it's basic layer from a cybersecurity standpoint, anti-money laundering, right? And if you look at paper money now, it's a vertical solution, i.e. the cybersecurity or not cybersecurity fraud is basically embedded into the note itself, right? But once you live in the digital world, how do you police that, right? And that's a challenge to think about. And the other angle is once we move on to CBDC, there's definitely a lot more traceability, right? Monitoring, and that can be a good thing from a monetary policy standpoint, but from individual standpoint, do we really want to be tracked for every single dollar that we have a transaction, right? So that's something to think about because with the data, it can be a powerful tool, but it can be a powerful weapon as well, right? Because as an individual, do I really want to have my every footprint, digital footprint being tracked by somebody? And then, you know, if the data gets hacked, then that can be, what's the risk put on me, right? So there's a lot of things to think about in the broader adoption when it comes to stablecoin, CBDC.
Thanks, Helena. I'm just keep on looking at the timer, right? So we have like 9 minutes left. I have a lot more questions to ask you, but maybe we go to our audiences. Any questions you would like to ask Helena or myself, and or any alternate viewpoints you have? We might be having a very boring discussion, but let's continue, right? So lastly, right? If you are participating next year in the same session, what do you think we are discussing next year? You know, from your point of view, what should be the discussions, right?
Look, I hope next year we can truly talk about post-COVID era, because I feel like we are not quite there yet. But I do think, or at least hope, that we can talk about things like DLT, Web3, metaverse, and alternative currency as less of a buzzword, but more of a utility to power some innovation. And I think the other thing that will be taking a much more of a center stage is data privacy. Just because there's so much data sharing, it's a bit of a paradox, right? You want to power more data sharing, but you want to focus on data privacy, and which is why earlier I think there's so much effort on technology solution, right? And technology is just one piece of it, and the other piece, you know, with the Web3 movement, there's a thought, right, of the user-owned content. If it is my data, perhaps instead of platform owning the data, I want to hold my data and monetize. Right? So there's a lot of things to think about. I hope that we get to speak to some of those next year. What about you?
You know, I like the idea, what you just said. Hopefully there's no buzzwords, right? We are like practical use cases, the use cases which is really impacting the society, right? And we are delivering to the promise of like democratizing product and services, right? You know, if I'm the consumer, I own my data, I should get more personalized, hyper-personalized
right?
Products and services. So I hope rather than just talk, there are products in the market, and it's
you
really,
are doing the real work.
Yeah, we are doing the real work. So I
Yeah.
think that's what I like to see. And obviously, yes, then maybe NFTs and metaverse, right? How do we merge?
Not as scams, but real use cases.
Yeah, real use case. How do you merge those virtual and physical worlds together? And then what are the use cases? So maybe more buzzword of virtual world, but no buzzword for the physical world next year, right?
Sounds
That's what I
exciting
think.
already.
Good.
I think they were fine.
All right, so I think thanks again, and if you have any question at this stage, let us know. Otherwise, we'll let you go 5 minutes earlier and have a short break to all of you. Okay, sorry, couldn't see you.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to tell you that this was a very interesting discussion that you guys are having.
Thank you very much.
It is a pleasure listening to both of you. So it's not boring at all.
Thanks a lot.
And it's really thinking futuristic and giving a practical angle to all the things that are happening in the world, right? In digital world. I just wanted to ask you a small question. How do you see these cryptocurrencies or the currencies backed? You briefly mentioned about digital currencies backed by central banks, right? Issued by central banks. How do you see these coming along, and how fast they will be issued, right?
If you allow me to go first, right? So as Helena mentioned, I think what's important is the use case, right? So particularly so today, like what's happening, from what I see happening is that 80% of the central banks globally, right, are at some stage of either discussing, planning, or issuing CBDC, right? So I think regulators have come so far. Now, depending on the economy, let's say China, right, which digital yuan or digital currency, electronic payment, lot of good use cases, right? And then a lot of things. So because it's digital currency, it can be easily traced, right? So can that be also used for anti-money laundering? Because you can always trace the source of the fund. Can that be done? Second aspect could be, is it just digital or is it smart currency, programmable currency, right? So let's say as a central bank or an authority, you issue funds for a specific purpose, and then you program the currency so that it can be only used for that purpose, and you cut the middleman out, and then you reach directly to the end user, right, who is being impacted. So let's say a flood or a disaster, so you're just giving them something together to do with that disaster, right? So that could be another thing. In China particularly, DCEPs will be designed to support offline processing, so even if you're not connected to the internet, as long as you have a mobile device, you should be able to use your digital currency, which is also good, right? And as an insurance company, we should also see how we can then use it, because it should not be about collecting money from the customers, but also disbursing at the right amount. So how can then banks and insurance companies can work with the regulator to promote financial inclusion or insurance inclusion, or come up with more affordable products? So I think there's a lot more potential from my point of view. Helena, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would just add that, look, I was recently in a conference where a lot of central bankers were having a similar discussion. They were actually ideas like having a CBDC, and either is issued really by a whole new solution by central bank, or maybe it's a stable coin that's backed by a CBDC. And all these are on the table. You can hear them actually bouncing off ideas. But at the moment, I think what's lacking is really the regulation. I think that's a key piece, right? Because a lot of times people think about stablecoin nowadays. It's called stablecoin, doesn't mean it's stable. By nature, right? So you have to see what is backing it, right? Because if you're looking at a current currency, it's the counterparty risk. It's with the government or central bank, right? But a lot of the stable coins nowadays, so-called, you need to look at what's assets that's backing it, right? So I think there needs to be a lot more regulatory oversight in what it's, because you need to have a stability in the currency, right, to be for payment purposes, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like, based on what I'm hearing, it's still a lot of discussion, experimentation going on at this stage, right? As opposed to, okay, we know this is what we're going to do, we're just going to execute.
Yes, and if I can add, good regulation, good supervision, good oversight, and more important is interoperability, right? Because if there are so many digital currencies or CBDCs, then we have same problem of settlements, right? So I think a long way to go, but I'm very optimistic, if you ask me personally. So I'm not sure whether we have answered your question. Thank you. Any other question we have?
I think there's one more.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for sharing your views on the banking, the new normal. I think I have a question on this payments, right, aspect, which you obviously mentioned about SME segment, right? So SME, as you meant, their contribution, the size which they play in the economy, right, and in terms of employment and otherwise as well, right? So obviously in the banking world, right, you have the payment function where the merchant things are happening, and there's a cash management function, right? So do you see any convergence happening between these two areas which allows SMEs to better handle their cash flow management?
Yeah, good question. You like to take it, Helena?
Do we see a cash payments? Can you elaborate a bit more on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think if we take an example of payment, how a company is operating, right? So they are operating based on the capital, right? How much capital they have to deal with their spending, and all their payments which they're getting from various customers, right? All this needs to be accounted for to deal what their order book can be, right? So they always subscribe to a cash management where they're taking loans from banks to make sure there is a pipeline of inflow so that they can do the deal. But at the same time, they're expecting payment from their other side, right? So these two sides are kind of operating in silos. Whereas if you merge these two sides, there's a lot of benefit which SME can leverage from their own incoming payments.
Sure. If you allow me, maybe.
Go for it.
Yeah. That should be the use case, right? What you just said, right? So what do I see? First of all, how all those retail payments started, right? When all those retail payments like FastAir, PromptPay in Thailand, and UPI in India, they all started, banks were worried, right? Like, what's the real use case? But the regulator says you have to go live. So people went live, right? But now you see the acceptance, and now you see the limits, right? Are they really retail payments? I think more and more SMEs demand real-time payments, right? And I think that changes the cash management landscape because it's real-time liquidity, right? You have a more knowledge of money coming in and cash in and cash outflows, right? And then you are right? So if it is all available and if it's not really embedded finance, but maybe open banking, right? And there's a third-party payment service provider or account information provider where if you have visibility of all the flows, right, can you not get overdraft easily, right? Yeah. So I think from a payment perspective, real-time payment gives you that real-time position of your liquidity and takes away all those management you have to do for your flows, right? So I think real-time payments can really help, and sometimes I wonder, would you need a cash management solution in future, right? That's what I think should be the case, right? So I'm not sure whether that was your question, basically.
No, it was definitely.
Yeah. Sorry? We discussed outside. Yeah, exactly. Thanks again, and really appreciate all your time and patience, and thank you very much.